the weekly feed. Taylor Goldsmith from Dawes is back. It's good to see you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Dawes with the new record. All your favorite bands. Number 4, record number 4.
Yep.
So now you're legitimate. That's what this is. You're legitimized.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually thinking about this the other day. How in any review or any sort of thing that I read, article about this record or about this band, they still talk about young band from LA, new band from LA. And I really love that because I feel like a lot of bands on their 4th record or something, you might be like, oh yeah, well then they've been around forever or something.
You technically release a greatest hits after 3 records.
Right.
It's not advised, but some people do it,
Yeah.
and what they always make the same mistake, by the way, they call it volume 1.
Right. Yeah, you're not having another one.
That's it.
Yeah.
If you're releasing a greatest hits after 3, you're done. There's a reason why your label is pushing you to do that.
Yeah, so I think it's awesome that people still see us as like the young kids on the block, which is cool for us.
It is, I guess, an anomaly. I mean, that not every band gets that.
Yeah, like when you think, and great bands, you think of like Arcade Fire or Band of Horses or something, and they're 3 or 4 records deep, and I realize their level of success is astronomical compared to ours, but people are like, oh yeah, well these are like well-established bands that are well into their careers.
While you guys could technically still get Best New Artist at the Grammys.
Right. And I think that's so cool.
Do you ever think of yourself, by the way, in the greatest hits sort of thing? Like, do you ever think of your catalog in that way? Like,
I do in terms of, like, when you go see a Tom Petty set,
yeah,
there's maybe like a deep cut or two.
But you're getting the jukebox.
You're getting the hits,
yeah, right.
and it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
And we, we're not really a band with hits, but we do have, the flagship songs of each record, the 3 or 4 songs, and it's fun to just play those, and then always rep whatever the new record is. Like on our sets right now, we have we're playing 7 or 8 songs from the new album, and
which
then
is almost the entire new album.
Yeah, which is almost the whole thing. And then especially if you play the last song, which makes up like a third of it. Right. But then, and then we just do the 2 or 3 main songs from each of the rest of the records, and it just feels like a really good set. We're like, oh, this feels. I don't know if we would call it our best of or our greatest hits, but it's really good to watch an audience respond to that.
And then you have some bands like Sonic Youth who will basically only stick to the new record. Like 30 years in, they're still only playing the new record with like 1 song at the very end. It's like such a different thing.
Right.
Well, anyway, congratulations on this record because it's another great one. It's a beautiful record. The lyrics are outstanding. I don't know how you can continuously do that as a songwriter to really. I was listening earlier, and I realized you have so many words.
Yeah, there's a lot of words sometimes.
Yeah, and I don't mean that like you're not spitting rhymes or anything like that. Right. But your what do you call it? Your lexicon is quite big for a songwriter, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I've always it's always never felt done. I've always felt like I had to write more and more, and sometimes maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot. Like a song like Somewhere Along the Way. It could have been easy enough to just write 1 chorus and then be like, okay, that's the chorus. But instead, for some reason, I felt compelled to write a different chorus every time that lyric Somewhere Along the Way came around, and I thought it made it better. It might just make it more chewy and challenging or something. I don't know. Or like on our 3rd record, there's a song Just Beneath the Surface that I just kept writing and writing and writing that eventually we decided we're going to cut this into 2 songs, and that's why it sort of bookends the record. But originally, it was just 1 really long song.
Yeah, I guess I love that you do it that way. The compliments there.
Thanks.
And I heard this one friend, I guess, tell me at one point that if you've only got 1 line to repeat over and over and over, you don't have much to say. And I don't think that's true for every example because sometimes you're just trying to drive a point home and everything. But when you're doing it kind of like this, you do have something to say. It's kind of proving that point. There's more to this story than just
Yeah, and that's always been one of my favorite things, not only about songwriting, but just about songs that I'm listening to, is when a songwriter is able to bring you into a situation and then force you to look at it from a different perspective. Like any good work of art, where you have to, oh wow, that could be a reality too, and that can be a perspective as well. And then by the time you walk away from a situation, you're not just looking at from one person's shoes, but you're kind of seeing a bigger, more universal experience.
Right. And as a fan, it gives us so much more to dig into.
Right.
You know,
Hopefully, yeah.
Just to keep coming out of that. Did you guys? I saw a picture. Did you guys go to the Bahamas?
We did go to the Bahamas
for rehearsals.
They weren't for rehearsals, although
Okay.
I wish that's the kind of band that we were.
That's a great picture, by the way. Here we are in front of our plane headed to the Bahamas.
We ended up playing someone's birthday. Some fan of the band that wanted us to fly to his birthday, and he put us on. He chartered this plane, and we'd never done anything like that.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. But so we and in a way it was rehearsals. It was one of the It was one of the last times we played a lot of these new songs before, starting this tour.
Right.
But yeah, it was great. It was a good way to kind of reset before heading out for a long time. We all were on jet skis and jumping off cliffs and,
Exactly what I want to hear about when you're like, I don't want to just hear that you flew down there and played a birthday party and then came home. Like I want to hear the Rolling Stones story and all of that stuff at the time we spent on the islands.
Yeah, it was as, as rock star as we could be, but also, as the operative phrase being as much as we could be.
Right.
There was also a lot of just NBA finals and sitting around.
you can't miss it.
Yeah,
Why
exactly.
not? But I guess this whole thing is what I'm grasping is here. The whole setup for this one has been different, and it's been talked about how you guys did the pre-production live in front of everyone, and you took it around. But it's what I see is the routine of routine when you're album number 4. And it's all kind of set of how you do things, and this is the setup, and it seems like you guys pushing against that a little bit.
Yeah, I think even if it's just for the sake of ourselves and our own experience doing this stuff, you got to find ways to keep it interesting and to keep it fresh. You look at these artists with these breakout albums, and there's always some sort of narrative, whether that's within the context of the material or if it's in the way a record was made. Or if something as simple as a producer chosen, or a band member replaced, or whatever those stories are. And for us, if we just kind of did what we've always done, and churned out another record, and gave guys like you and me nothing to talk about, it just wouldn't be as exciting for us. And because people are going to say whatever they want to say about it, but for us to be able to say, yeah, we made this record this way, this record this way, this record this way, it keeps each record with its own fingerprint, with its own identity. And with Stories Don't End, we consciously didn't play songs in front of people, and that I really like how that informed what that record ended up being. And with this record, it was something where let's make sure this record could stand up on its own 2 legs with just the 4 of us. And so we went out on tour and played 2 weeks worth of shows in small towns in California to make sure that was possible. And that was a blast because Dave, our producer, Dave Rawlings, he came on the tour with us, and he would stand out in the audience, kind of watch how people would react. Right. We would sound checks would be spent reworking stuff, and then after each show, we'd all kind of run backstage and kind of get back in the huddle. It was like having a coach. And it was really cool because we would do little shifts here and there, like, why don't you put the solo after the bridge tonight?
Right.
And then so we would do that, and like, okay, that did this, and then we would put it before the bridge, and then all of a sudden we'd hear like, woo, and they're like, oh wow, people are responding. Maybe they don't even know why.
It's a different way to do songwriting, right?
But
there,
yeah, it's just like
it's almost giving something up too. It's like I'm kind of giving up a little bit of my craft.
Yeah.
Too.
And I think that you have to eventually, if you're gonna stay productive,
right.
if you're gonna continue to put out material regularly, you have to trust the material, and you have to trust the way that it comes out. If we were to get overly precious about it, we just wouldn't release that many records.
Yeah.
And I know we only have 4, but we're already like 7 songs into the next one.
Wow.
At least in terms of like writing. And
so that's it. I never get the sense, and I'm sure it's complete perception, that you take too much downtime.
Yeah, not really.
Like, and maybe it's because you had the New Basement tapes, and that was in there. There was a Laura Marling line about why she took 2 years between records instead of her 1.5 years, because she just pumps them out there. And she's like, she got in her own routine where she would force herself to live so she could have something to write about.
Right.
But when I look at you, it's like I don't even see where you have that time. I don't see, like, you write a lot of love songs,
right,
more or less. It's like, when does he have the time to have relationships?
It's true. Actually, I've been thinking about that myself. But I think, I mean, I don't know. I think that we've always felt most alive and most happy when we're touring. I think, obviously a lot of the guys have beautiful girlfriends in their lives, and they're out on tour with us quite a bit. And I'm hoping to figure that out for myself someday. Who knows? Maybe not. But
there's a lot more pressure when you're the singer too. It's like it's a lot more vetting. I would say.
And also, it's just the simple thing of if we go home for 2 weeks. These guys are such hard workers and they practice and everything, but like their workload is a different thing. If we go home for 2 weeks for me, and they would say the same thing, but it's like, okay, maybe I can get a song, maybe I can get 2 songs.
Right.
I don't know how to not work.
Yeah.
I've always felt that way, even if I'm told by all friends and family and people we work with, like, just take this month and do nothing.
Yeah.
Just hang out with your friends and do nothing. I'm still in the back of my head like, what song could I write? Like, what could I get ready for this next thing? It's just how I've always been wired.
What's that? The thing people say, you get to love what you do and you get paid for it. Like, you're going to be doing that regardless, so that you have that passion, you keep going. But so with the way you write though, and here you're talking about like, I've got to get that whole personal life thing straightened out. Where do you go when you're looking for those lyrics? Is it character based, or do you still find the time to have broken relationships throughout the year? That
there was one that just really did a number on me, so I'm able to just.
You got a few albums in that one.
Yeah, I sure did. Yeah, she's a lot of songs. And it's all good. We're pals and everything. Yeah. But so yeah, in a sense, a lot of it's personal, and then a lot of it's not. Like, a lot of it's very much exaggerated. Mm-hmm. Like a song off the new record, like Somewhere Along the Way. That's way far beyond anything I've ever experienced. That paints a picture of someone who I wouldn't want to spend any time around. Mm-hmm. Although maybe would be fascinating for 10 minutes. So yeah, there's a lot of exaggeration. There's a lot of stuff that's not me, especially on earlier songs or like A Little Bit of Everything or something, or Bear Witness, where it's just clearly not experiences I've had. Right. And I think that's, at least for my trip as a songwriter, I think that's important to chase down, because you do look at a lot of songwriters that use themselves as sort of a science project, and they sort of dig in and they just kind of figure out like where it really hurts, and then just try to draw that out
just so they can have the art.
Yeah, and then you look at them after a lifetime's worth of a career, and they're pretty beat up,
right?
At their own hand, and I don't, like anybody else, I don't want to have a job that's not going to make me happy.
Right.
And my job does make me really happy. And I think that it's important for me to strike that balance of like, yeah, maybe it's not the most romantic story. Maybe I'm not some heartbroken drug addict that
but you bleed for your art by continuously working on it.
Yeah.
Not so much having to literally bleed for your art.
Right. And you look at a lot of artists that have these careers where they've devoted themselves to this one thing. Yeah. And it's so profound when looking back on it. Like, Woody Allen or something. Sure. Like if you were to just show someone one Woody Allen movie, although it can be one of the greatest movies you've ever seen, obviously, once you realize the body of work and the constant commitment, it doesn't matter that he might have just been some guy that was not necessarily troubled, or I don't know what his life was like, but if he was just some guy that was like, yeah, I like writing and I make these movies, all that stuff it doesn't matter, because he has 40 years worth of movies that he's
people
made.
Are just less human in that way.
Yeah.
And I'm not discounting his humanness or anything like that, but when you look at it from this side, it's like,
yeah.
And then I really like doing things too. I'm very passionate about things, but I don't think even my highest passions will ever reach that level of being able to pull them off.
That's another. You have to. You're. I don't know. You just live on a different planet when you're able to access creativity on such a regular basis.
Makes me a little bit envious.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of people like that. Like when we did the Basement Tapes thing, that was something that I really witnessed in Elvis Costello. Mm-hmm. All those guys are
continuously puts it out like that, and in so many different things, and
like he has 30-something records. He has almost as many records as Bob Dylan, and his first one didn't come out till like 12 years after Dylan's first, or even more, I think. Yeah. He and when we were working on some of those Dylan lyrics, there would be some pieces of paper where it would just be 2 stanzas, and Elvis would like, oh, we need more lyrics, and then I would kind of like take a drink of water and turn around and Elvis would, and it'd be completed. And
you ever just want to just give him the finger right there?
yeah, I mean it was so crazy to see,
Yeah.
and then that was one of those like, oh, that's what the Men from the Boys looks like moments, you know.
Right.
And all those people that were involved in that are so creative. Jim, everyone was just music pours out of them.
Oh, it's an amazing
But with
group.
Elvis,
Yeah.
there's just this other thing of like, I've heard stories of when he said, "Oh, I want to make this record with this producer and this band," and they said, "Cool, when do you want to start?" And like, "Oh, I don't have any songs written, so what do you say, 2 weeks?" So he can call upon it like the Woody Allens, like whoever, so fast, and that's I think the dream, at least for me, to be able to get to that creative place where you're there's so much material coming out of you, and obviously you want it to be quality.
Yeah.
But
if you're writing that much, I mean, there's a rule of odds things that comes into it. So
Yeah.
if you're writing that much, there's going to be gems.
mm-hmm,
You know,
absolutely,
they're going to be there, and then you can start looking at your greatest hits catalog.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it all makes sense.
and then you go volume 4,
Right. I did want to get one other take on your experience with this. So you worked with Dave Rawlings. You had mentioned that you did it in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
How conscious are you of the two worlds of Nashville? And because what you guys play, whether you categorize it as Americana or folk rock or whatever it is, that you can bridge it to country music.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a bridge there. And here you are working in Nashville with a guy who is very un-Nashville
Right.
in that sense.
Right.
You know, is there ever that, do you see that world as you're kind of interacting in it? And does it ever, when you look at that, do you go, how is that songwriting,
Right.
versus what I'm doing?
Right. Do you mean sort of like the
I'm talking like the
Vegas,
pop Nashville,
like cheap,
yeah, all of that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bummer, and I mean, I'm not as familiar with that stuff as a lot of other people that have lived there. Like I've listened to interviews with, Jason Isbell and stuff, and to hear him just kind of take those people out to task.
Isbell ain't scared.
Yeah, it's great, and and he's always dead on about
Yeah.
it. And he's like, but this person has some good songs, this person
Right.
does not. and I've kind of always kept blinders on with that part of Nashville. I don't watch the Grammys. I can't handle that. I have learned a long time ago that the music that we make as Dawes, appeals to a small fraction of music fans, and we are so lucky in this day and age to have one of them, let alone enough to stay on tour and put out records. But if I start paying close attention to the top of the country charts and and watching the Grammys, I'll just want to quit.
There's actually an Isbell line that says, the more shitty music that you listen to, the more shitty music that you'll produce.
Yeah. I mean, I just have to pretend that everyone still knows every word to Visions of Johanna, and that everyone still sits at home memorizing Songs of Love and Hate by Leonard Cohen.
Yeah.
I know that's not true, but that's the kind of music fan that I want to be, and so that's the kind of music fan that I want to play to, and I'm not going to cater to anything else. And Dave is very much like that. Dave is, you think of those records that him and Gil made, they're obviously not playing by anybody's rules except their own. And so to be around a guy like that it was so good for us, because I think I realize that we are a hard band to place in one particular category, which I guess is a good way to be, but it's not like, we're not necessarily...
It's all rock.
Yeah, it's rock and roll,
rock.
and that's how we
Yeah.
describe it, but some people would say, like, like maybe the indie kids would say, well, no, they're an Americana band, they don't belong with us. And maybe the Americana kids would be like, no, they're not this, they're that. I don't know. But I do know that in those sorts of questions, it was really great to have a guy like Dave. I remember certain conversations where he would say, we are so lucky to not have to play the relevance game.
Mm-hmm.
And, Gillian and him are great examples of not being relevant. And I'm sure he would say the same thing. Yeah,
singers,
and they're legendary
Yeah.
in their way and for what they do. And they always will be. They cannot put out another record for another 8 years, and it will be an event, and it will be great. And if they were to try to, this is popular now, maybe we should try to get that kind of guitar sound or that kind of keyboard sound or anything like that, I feel like that just wouldn't work for why we all love them.
And you turn into Aerosmith.
Right. Just trying to stay relevant.
Right.
And then you hear these, like, you hear about U2 complaining that no one likes Songs of Innocence. It's like, well, the fact that you're complaining about,
Look
like,
what you did.
yeah.
That's a whole other interview.
Yeah,
that we can go down right now.
And I think that yeah, and so for us, I don't know what our next records are going to sound like. I hope they all sound as different as they possibly can, but always naturally who we are. But I don't think we're ever going to play that game of oh, well, this is going on in contemporary music, so let's try to keep an eye on that as well. We've just never been good at that, nor do we want to be.
Al Taylor, I think it's very important that you're doing that. I think it's important that you live in a world where everybody knows every word of Visions of Johanna. And congratulations on all your favorite bands, the new Dawes record.
Right on.
It's great to talk to you, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
All right. It's the Weekly Feed.